We were talking about the steps which are related to architecture vision, right? So, so when we were discussing about those steps, so we have basically discussed about how to establish the architecture project, right? And if I go to practitioner and basic and steps. So we have discussed that how to establish the architecture project, where you need to identify the architecture team, project plan, governance, identify the stakeholders' concern and business requirement as per your project. Then you need to confirm and elaborate the business goals, business drivers, and business constraint. Business goals are nothing but these are identifying the strategies or the objective so that like to reduce the cost, increase the customer satisfaction, etc. Business drivers to understand the key factors which influence the business like competitive pressures, regularity, requirements, business constraint like uh, resource limitation, legal compliance factors, etc. Then we have discussed about the evaluation of the capabilities that you need to identify what is the current capabilities of the organization and what is desired for the architecture point of view. What are the gaps? Then assess the readiness for the business transformation, which basically the main objective is to evaluate the organization readiness, is they are ready to accept the change or not. Then you will define the boundaries of your project, what is included, what is excluded. Uh, Then you need to confirm the elaborate the architecture principles, whether these are mapped with the business principles or not. Then develop the architecture vision, where you will create a very high level architecture vision document, which the one which I have discussed yesterday, template, and you need to make sure that it is uh, it is aspirational. This is it covers the business concerns or the IT stakeholder needs. Then we define the target architecture value propositions and the key performance factors like reduction of the cost, operational cost, improve the service delivery time, increase the customer engagement, and then identify the business transformation and risk mitigation activities. So you need to identify then when we change the current state to future state, what are the risks get included and what are the mitigation plans. Develop a statement of the architecture work and secure the approvals. So statement of the work includes the scope, deliverables, timelines, and the architecture team's responsibilities. Right. So these are the things which we need to step by step we need to follow so that we can uh, develop a architecture vision document. Now, another important part which comes to the architecture vision is the request for architecture work. So that is that. I just go to the So what we can do here, uh, so now what we can do that whenever we are talking about the uh, request of the means request for architecture work. Right? So what is request for architecture? See, uh, request for architecture work. Right. So now, whenever we are talking about the request for architecture work, so it's a basically document, right? So it is a document, and that document is so consider this is your document. Right? So this document is that triggers the start of the architecture development set. So it is usually created after preliminary phases, and as a result, it it basically contains, you can say, uh, a reference for the architecture work, terms for the reference for the architecture work, which ensures that everyone is involved, project is aligned with the objectives and goals. Right. So this is a document. So this is the document, and this document includes everything, right? Uh, which is the reference point for the architecture work, right? So let us understand few things related to this request for work. So um, first thing is, for example, you are having a very high level sponsoring organization, right? So this is the you create this document and you send it to the sponsoring organization, and you want that this document, as I mentioned, this is a trigger point, right? So actually, one second, something wrong. Let me just you know say again. So request for work, it's a very high level document which triggers the ADM, ADM lives. So as I mentioned, it is created right after preliminary phase. In the preliminary phase, what we are talking about the organization, scope, business units, stakeholders, etc. Okay, where you are having everything which is related to the organization. Now, uh, when we are talking about this document, right? So this document, uh, its main purpose is that request for the architecture. So its main purpose is, so it is created after preliminary phase, and its main purpose is to request for architecture work. So you can say that how the architecture work will be started. See, there will be, means in the preliminary phase, we are having very high level organization structure. On the basis of that, architecture vision is created, right? Architecture vision is more specific to the project level, right? So now for your project, what needs to be done? So that is included in this document. So request for work is sent by the organization or the client, or you can say sponsoring organization. So they are basically sending you this sponsoring organization. They will send this to which team? Architecture organization team. Means maybe it's IT team or whosoever is working for as a uh, architect architect team. So it will be sent to them. Okay. So now they are sending that, for example, they are saying on-premises environment is to be converted into cloud-based environment. Not only that, but there are so many components. There are so many, uh, you know, different elements which are included in this document. We will see one template related to that. I will come to that. Right? Now, this request for work is, it's as I mentioned, it is the initial or it's a kickstart for your ADM cycle. Right. So this will be the approved plan, first of all. This is approved by the stakeholders or the sponsoring organization. Right. So it can be approved, or you can say uh, it could be a approved document, or it could be a approved change request. Okay. It can be an approved change request also. So that is the purpose of this architecture request for architecture work. Now, if someone is creating this document, what are the things which get included? Right? What will be the content of this organization? What will be the content of this request for architecture work? So request for architecture work. So first of all, as I mentioned, sent by the this is sent by the organization or sponsoring organization. So they are having a clear-cut mission, or you can say goal, right, of the organization. Mission or goals, or you can say strategic goals of the organization. So it will include in this document. So it will have the business goals, because see, this document you are sending it to the architecture team, and architecture team, they will take as a reference point, take this document as a reference point, and they will develop the architecture vision accordingly, right? So business goals and objectives. So what it includes: business strategies, business goals, and uh, what will be the planned changes, right? So those things will be included in the business goals. Third one is the strategic plans. And changes in business environment. So they are basically, yeah, here what we are talking about the strategic plans. Strategic plans means what will be strategic objectives of the organization and how they relate to business landscapes like technology, market changes, etc. So this will be the part of the document. Fourth, it will include budget. So what will be the budget for this complete project? It will also include constraints. What are the things we can do, we cannot do? Right? So it will have a complete business system and IT descriptions. So how their IT works currently. So it will be IT system description, which is very high level, not in very detailed level, and the business system also. Then tell me what else can be here. This is the one which the sponsors, they are basically sending it to the architecture team. So do you think am I missing anything? Timeline, right? So what are the timelines? Are the timelines? So those things are also included. I think I have covered all this. We'll check our document also. I will come to that. Right. So these are the content of these are the content of your architecture request for architecture work. So first, there will be what is the purpose? The purpose is that to create a high-level overview, which is sent by the sponsoring organization to the architecture organization. And this is the formal initiations of the architecture development cycle. And it can be the output of the approved change request or originate from the migration plan. So it can be coming from anywhere, or it could be a new request also. Now, what are the contents? So these are the contents where we have discussed the mission, business goals, strategic plans, business budget information, constraints, business systems, and uh, IT infrastructure or IT system descriptions, and the time limits or timelines or deadlines. So that must be the. So now let us see quickly some request for architecture work template. So for that, I'll go to Google. Request for architecture work template. Okay. So you can see this is the request for architecture work. So this document is sent from the sponsoring organization to architecture organization to trigger the start of an architecture development cycle. As I mentioned, this is the trigger point. It helps describe the business imperatives behind the architecture work, thus driving the requirements and performance metrics for the architecture work. Now, what is step one? We need to develop the architecture work, complete the form of the request for architecture work. So these are the, if you see, these are this is the document step one, complete the form of the request, project background, summary of the request, right? And organization sponsors. Sponsors means identify the sponsor, those who are basically sponsoring this project, right? Which department of the company, right? Billing will go to which department, right? So clear support. And then we are having business imperative, like that which is related to the business, like change, any change or the goal of the organizations. Then we have the success criteria. So how to judge the architecture work to perform is a success. To what extent do you want the business to be improved? Indicate what a good outcome of the architecture work will look like. Short-term criteria defines the desired content and the usage of the architecture product. For example, in place new CRM system. Long-term criteria defines the eventual business improvement resulting the architecture work. For example, increase the revenue by 10%, right? So this is the long-term which we are converting, means short-term criteria or the long-term criteria. Those we are defining as a success criteria for that. This is project timeline. So you can see here, this is preliminary architecture vision, architecture definitions, opportunities. So these are different phases in the ADM, right? Migration planning and implementation. So then the constraint list of the constraint, the architecture work is to be taken. And additional information, some extra information you want to give. So this will be the part of the request for architecture. You can also define that um, resources related for the like teams, tools, technology that will be used. That also we can mention into this. Any question related to request for architecture work? Now, let me ask a question then. What do you think how uh, in phase A, which is the architecture vision, yeah, in phase A, in phase A, now tell me that architecture vision, which is our phase A, this one. How this architecture phase A and request for architecture work is related, but how you can relate architecture vision with request for architecture work. Any point? Now you know what is request for architecture work. Someone is giving that a sponsoring organization, they are giving you one document, and that is the trigger point. And the architecture vision is that with respect to the to your project, what you are doing, you are creating the scope, you are identifying the stakeholders, you are identifying the high level business goals, you are evaluating the capabilities, readiness, etc. Now, first one is that establish the architecture work, architecture project. Now tell me, when you establish the architecture project, right, how request for work is important for that? Any idea? How request for work or request for architecture work is related to architecture vision for establishing the architecture project? See, request for architecture work is what? It's a document which is sent by the sponsor organization to architecture team so that they can start the project. Now you have a document where you have request for work is means what? That is what you need to do. That is the scope, right? So when you are establishing the architecture project or when you are starting or initiating your architecture project, then once you are having request for architecture work document, you can you can you know understand the stakeholders, or we can say you can identify the governance. Now you know what to do, right? Because current and the expected states. So those are helpful for creating the teams. Yeah, architecture, you can form the teams. So those things we can do with the help of the when we are talking about the establishing the architecture project. Same way, what will be the second point? The second point can be, you can say, it is helpful for identifying the concerns, business requirements, right? Because you need to create the architecture vision. So business requirements, you are you are basically here to confirm what are the business goals, right? Because request for work for architecture work is giving you these things. You need to know business goals, business drivers, right? Business constraints. So all these things are coming from request for work only. If you want to know what is happening currently in the organization, right? What are the people, technology, processes, and what you need to develop, which is your future state. So in the request for architecture work, it includes the organization capabilities. So organization capabilities, those you are getting it from the request for work. You're also organization capabilities what? People, their technologies which they are using, right? What are the different processes, right? And you need to align it with the with your future state, which is the final outcome of your project. Now, whenever you are basically creating this, whenever you are creating this future state, so at that time, you are basically, you need to know that whether the new capabilities, new business future state, will it be acceptable by the business or not? Converting on-premises environment to cloud-based environment, is it acceptable or not? Okay, so you need to assess the readiness, readiness of business transformation. You need to assess that. What else? The scope is also defined in this by using this architecture, request for architecture, uh, request for architecture work. So now these points I have discussed, let us just check our documentation once. So this is preliminary. This is architecture vision, which is request for work. So request for work overview. So here these are the components, purpose of the request, which we have discussed, high level overview sent by the sponsoring organization to the architecture organization. Right? And content, these are the contents which we have discussed. Right? Developing organization, and these are the steps which I have just explained to you. Steps in phase A, architecture is related to the request for architecture work. Establish the project, confirm and elaborate the business goals, drivers, constraint, define the scope, right? Whatever we have. Right. So this is the summary of the key request for the architecture work documents section. Business imperative, which we have discussed, success criteria, time frame, and purpose of the architecture. So this is the template which we have discussed, right? Now, okay, so in this diagram, what I'm doing, create a sponsoring organization, receive as the architecture, organization as the input, right? So here in the preliminary phase, what we are doing, we are just creating some sponsoring organizations structure and business unit, entire organization point of view. But here we retrieve something which is related to our architecture or project. Okay, so we receive this request for architecture work, right? Now, this architecture in the architecture vision, because we are receiving this on the basis of that B, C, and D. These are taking it as input up till here. And here, migration planning, we are basically creating the implementation plan. It generates the as terms of the request of reference of the architecture work. And that this is the implementation phase. And this is the change management. Use or generate the result of approved architect. So as I mentioned, whenever you are in the request for work, it could be a change request also. Right? So it could be here, the change request. So this change request again can trigger a request for work for the architecture visit. So diagram you provided highlights the relationship between the different phases. See if the request for work architecture is any. So we will again further discuss about these phases, that what is input and what is output for them. Right? So now the request for architecture work is created during the preliminary phase and is essential for initiating the architecture development cycle. request for work serves as the terms of reference for the architecture work, outlining the objective and governance. So it can be generated as a result of the approved architecture change request, right? And this is so this is basically a request for the architecture work. Now let us talk about another thing which is called the communication plan. So what is communication? See, whenever uh, you are creating a communication plan, so the communication plan is that is again part of phase A only. So the communication. So whenever you are in the architecture vision, when you are basically creating a diagram for the architecture, right? High level diagram. So you need to inform the stakeholders. Right? So, so you need to inform the stakeholders because they need to know what is going to happen as a architecture point of view. Right? So it means you need to know who are the stakeholders. So for that, we are having a stakeholder map. So that stakeholder map is basically shows is business wise which stakeholder, maybe IT wise, what are the stakeholders to whom we need to inform, right? So those things are basically in the stakeholder map. Now, when this communication plan happens, then how will you proceed then? So what are the steps which you will be following? So now, from the beginning of the architecture vision, I have mentioned that we need to have different steps. So first step, I have discussed that establish the architecture work or architecture project. So this is the one where you start or kick off the architecture project, where you define the roles, responsibility, and the governance structure. So now in this phase, right, or in this step, as I mentioned, it's a kickoff the architecture project, and you are defining the roles, responsibilities, and governance structure. So, so this step basically ensures that everyone who is involved and what are their roles within the architecture of the development. So um, it also sets a stage that how the architecture will be managed and covered. So here you are defining the roles. You are uh, defining that it's who will be included, who will be involved, and what are their roles. So this is the part of these are the part of their communication plan. Next, so communication plan is not only limited to the stakeholders. Communication plan means whenever you are proceeding with your project or when you are designing your project, you need to tell that these peoples are included or involved and these peoples are not required. Or not required is not important, but who will be involved and what are their roles. Second step, which we have discussed, is basically we need to identify the stakeholders, their concerns, and and their business requirement. So here the main purpose is that we need to identify the or categorize the stakeholders. We need to categorize their concerns. We need to categorize their business requirement. So here you need to create a stakeholder map. So stakeholder map is basically related to the business units. For example, you are creating on the basis of the business. So you are saying these are the business leaders. Okay. These are IT department related. These are end user, etc. And for each stakeholder, they are having their concerns, maybe related to the cost, performance, security, and they are having their own requirement as well. So this mapping is foundational for aligning the architecture work with the organization needs, and it ensures that all the concerns are addressed. Right? So, so here the communication plan comes into the picture that to whom we need to inform, how we know they are concerned, how we get their business requirement. So now, so first one is the establish the architecture work. Second is the stakeholder maps. Now, next is that so so next is you need to elaborate the business goals, business drivers, and constraints. So here, what you are basically doing, you need to ensure that the architecture work is aligned with the business goals, business drivers, or business constraints. So here, what we are doing, um, we need to deep dive into business goals. Is what are their key objectives? What organization wants? For example, they want to reduce the cost. They want to improve the customer experience. Right? So that is again a a communication plan is required. You need to know what are the business goals. You need to know what are the improvements which are required. Okay. Then it is business drivers, which basically focusing uh, on the business wise to adopt architectural changes. Right? For example, new technologies, maybe market competitions, and then the constraint. Constraints are nothing but the limitations. So you need to define the limitation that budget, time, maybe compliance, etc. So, so that is the another, you can say, in the step where we are using the communication plan. Next one is when we assess the readiness, or we will talk about the evaluate the capabilities. So until unless you are having the business communication or the communication plan for each step, so uh, you will not be able to design your architecture vision. So evaluate the capabilities. What is the current state? What is required in the um, future state? So that is the current state and the future state. Then you need to assess the readiness and business. So uh, assess the readiness for business transformation. Is your that organization is ready for the business transformation or not? So, so this step basically assess that whether the organization has the resources, commitment, and the uh, cultural mindset to support the changes that the architecture will bring. So, and at the end, we are having scope. So, scope is basically what are the boundaries for the project. Okay. So, so let us see a template which is related to this communication plan. So, so this website looks like it is down, but here you will find a lot of documents. Systems. So communication plan is one of the TOGAF deliverables. You can create a TOGAF with some TOGAF software, right? So here, so first that list the stakeholders and describe their information needs. So communication plan is the way to deliver information needed by someone. It is in this step, determine the people, target group that need to receive a particular kind of information. So here, if you see, mm, right, stakeholder communication requirement. So this is the role, this is the name or group, and this is the information need. Like group CIO name is this, right? And up, updated the project status. Is that information? Let me just. This is not exactly. We'll say communication plan, stakeholder, stakeholder mapping. We'll see in the TOGAF we do we have. Okay. Just one second. I'm just trying to, because that website is down the one which we frequently use. Otherwise, everything is here. Let me just check in the images. Okay, I will get that, this template in the next class. So basically, what you will be having in that, you will be having a communication plan, something like this, but it will be in the form of a document where you will define what, who, when to communicate, right? So all that information is there. So um, that is basically the plan for that. So who means stakeholders, what means what information, how means how you will communicate to them, and when means uh, when the communication will happen, what is the frequency, right? So on the basis of that, we are creating these communication. Okay, so today we have discussed about the architecture request for our request for architecture work, and also we have discussed about the communication. Still, there are actually phase A is longest in all these phases because most of the time that enterprise architect is working on this phase A only. Right? So phase A, we need to discuss a lot of things. In next lecture, maybe we'll be talking about the business scenarios, requirement specification, principal goals, business transformation, right? So there are a lot of things, but we will discuss that one by one. Any question so far? So we will meet on Monday then. Hmm? All right. So that's it for today then. Meet tomorrow. We will meet on Monday.